And greetings. This is the Long in the Boot podcast, the podcast coming to you from the heel of the boot of Southwest Louisiana. I am your host, G Long, and sitting across the way from me is Deb.
Hi, G.
Hey, D.
And hello, people.
And hi, everybody.
Yeah.
Hi, everybody. Anyway, new microphone.
New mic. You've been very excited like a kid in a candy store.
Yeah, it sounds a little different.
Or a grown man with a microphone.
I kind of like it. I think I may need to finagle some settings. But
are you too far away?
No, it's not.
I get closer than you do.
Yeah.
I don't fear things coming at my mouth.
You don't, wait, what? Already? You're already getting dirty. My Lord, we just started, woman.
All right, I'm sorry. It was because I had to be good last episode. We had a guest. I'm so glad Boz was here.
And thanks to James the Buzz, for coming in and talking to us. And also,
the election hasn't happened yet.
Election hasn't happened yet.
Do your research, people, and cast your votes.
And but he is definitely coming.
But I'm leaning towards Boz.
I forgot to bring that piece of paper with the amendments. I wanted to mention a couple of amendments.
Well, I can sneak out of here at some point when you're rambling on.
Well, I'm rambling right now.
You want me to get in now?
I guess you could.
Mic off and everything?
Well, I'm not.
I just made a really inappropriate joke.
I'm not going to do it. I'm going to leave it open. And we're going to listen, and maybe the dogs will bark. Oh. It's quite see there? You see, dogs often get upset when doing a podcast that don't include the dogs themselves. We had the dogs out in a different room, and of course, now they're very upset.
Oh, no, Bella, get away.
But they'll calm down in a minute. And
all right.
Meanwhile, Deb is back.
Yes, I've returned.
That was quick.
After that break.
Man, what is that? That's like 80 feet down the studio hallway. That was quick.
I know. I'm fast like a bunny.
Because, of course, the amazing size of the Long in the Boot studios.
Oh, it's a huge
it's an edifice.
Parcel.
It is. Yes. And people drive by and they see the tower. I mean, they are so impressed.
Actually, they're impressed with my beautiful gardens.
Yes, the botanical gardens of Deb and the Long in the Boot studios.
The Long in the Boot studio. Come walk the gardens.
If you'd like to get a hold of the madness that is the Long in the Boot podcast, you can just email longintheboot@gmail.com. You can also call. I know it's old-fashioned.
It's always exciting when someone calls and leaves a message.
You can even text, by the way.
Oh, absolutely.
337-502-9011, and you can text or comment on anything you'd like to. And gosh, I'm going to use it if you call. I probably will. Try to be funny.
So you're just trying to lure people.
Sing us a song if you wish.
Ew.
Hey, you never know.
Well, no, only if it's like it's a Weird Al kind of song. Don't call it.
We might hit the Colonel Parker jackpot,
All right.
Anyway.
Do what you're going to do.
So anyway, thanks again to James the Boswell for coming in.
Election.
And I'm bringing him back. Win or lose, he's coming back.
Oh, absolutely. Pick a topic. Civil War.
Yeah, don't pick that topic. That's a 5-hour podcast.
Come on. Everybody that was an 8th grader at South Bow for 20 years would tune in. Oh, yeah, maybe so. Just to hear it.
We should review the Gone with the Wind movie. He's only seen it like 57 times.
Well, yes, probably so.
Probably knows it by heart.
And me with a daughter named Scarlett.
So we got the election coming up, by the way, speaking of which. There is an amendment that I just have to, it's just interesting to me. I saw it when we got the little form from our representative.
Yes, and you should
Brett
read
Guyman.
those things. You should be, checking things out.
Read that, because most everybody should have got one. And some of them are interesting. The first one, the amendment number 1 to the Louisiana Constitution, a vote for would prohibit use of funds and resources from foreign governments or non-governmental sources to conduct elections. A vote against would maintain current law, allowing resources and monies from foreign governments and non-governmental sources.
Who thought to put that on the ballot? Why would you consider?
Well, I have a better question.
Okay, is there money coming in from foreign governments?
That's my question.
Trying to
apparently in Louisiana.
And what are they
up
buying?
Until now?
What are they buying?
I don't know. Resources and monies from foreign governments. Resources and monies from foreign governments.
Well, I don't even know why we bother writing legislation for that. Who took the time to do that?
I don't know.
You are wasting our government taxpayer time.
But if you vote for it, those gosh darn foreign governments and non-governmental sources,
like pharmaceutical
will no
companies.
longer be allowed to use.
Well, no, they can't right now, right?
Yes, they can. That's the point.
They
maintain current law if you vote against it.
Oh, well, see, you know what just happened? It's what happens to a lot of people when they get in that booth and you read the way they've worded in their legalese the amendments.
Keywords here is a vote for would prohibit and a vote against would maintain. And currently, foreign governments and non-governmental sources, the funds from those can be used to conduct elections in the state of Louisiana.
So please pay attention to the gist of what they're saying.
And amendment number 2 caused me all manner of interest because I just didn't get it. A vote for provides that the freedom of worship in a church or other place of worship is a fundamental right worthy of the highest order of protection. A vote against would uphold present law, which states that no law shall be enacted respecting an establishment of religion or prohibiting the free exercise thereof. Now, here's the kicker.
Well, that's the First Amendment.
Yes, it's a clause in the First Amendment
to our Bill of Rights for the nation.
So if you vote against this amendment, you're upholding current law.
So vote against.
But remember, this Louisiana amendment just mimics the federal.
Yes, the federal is the minimum.
Right. A vote for would provide for the freedom of worship in a church or other place of worship is a fundamental right worthy of the highest order of protection. You have that. You already do have that.
Okay, so
I had to dig in
to find out what they're trying to do.
What's going on? And it has to do with shutting down the churches during the pandemic.
Oh, it's a response to that.
Because they use the law, they use actual law enforcement officials to LEOs for you people who like those kind of shows.
Is that a thing?
Yeah, LEO, law enforcement official.
Okay, because we don't want to just say the words.
Yeah, it's easier.
Law enforcement.
Using the LEOs to prevent churches from opening. You remember that one guy got arrested?
Yeah, I remember.
Well, this amendment basically would say, no, you cannot do that anymore. Even if the Black Death is going across the nation
church
and 5 out of 10 people are dying, if you want to have a gathering at your church, you will be protected having that.
But I couldn't have a gathering in my backyard for a barbecue.
Probably not.
What if I claimed it was a religious barbecue?
I'm sacrificing this cow.
It's a religious
barbecue. Did you kill
barbecue.
it? Well, no, it was killed previously and then cut up into small bits.
And wrapped in cellophane and styrofoam.
But I am worshiping this great feast.
All right. Well, anyway. People have to do what people want to do, and what they feel in their heart is correct, and in their mind. Actually, I'm more of I'm going to use my head when I'm voting, not my heart. Well,
how do you push the buttons?
What buttons?
The little tiny buttons. How do you use your head to push those little tiny buttons?
Oh, shut up. Wow. And you were fussing at me for being inappropriate right off the bat. But you made that. It was available. I could not ignore that.
Well, what am I going to do?
Stay married to me.
So, did you notice the smell of smoke in the air today?
I did.
Yeah, we have a topic. We have a topic, and strangely enough, they actually match. Now, I will be the first to say that I am leery of this topic.
Yeah.
Only because
we might be cursing ourselves.
Track record.
Yes, we do have a track record.
If you recall, you longtime listeners,
those that have been around for 3 years,
we had a hurricane episode, and then we had a hurricane.
The Galveston.
Yeah, we had the Galveston. We talked about the Galveston.
Because it's an interesting topic. It is.
And Laura then came and smacked us down.
Yes, and then we had the post Laura.
We were gone for a while, and we came back, and we talked about what had happened. And at that time, we mentioned that there was a little tiny possibility of a storm brewing up, and it turned out to be Delta.
Yes,
so it happened again.
And then,
so two podcast episodes about hurricanes were followed by hurricanes.
Yes.
Now we're going to be talking about fire.
Well, but we've had that's our third F, because we also had a flood and a freeze after those two hurricanes, because weather don't give a
front. Yeah. That's right. We've established.
Oh, many
you people
times.
haven't figured that out.
If you haven't noticed this trend in your own life,
weather is not your friend.
Well, it just doesn't care what you are planning.
It doesn't
what
care
you
at
have,
all.
what you
No
think.
feelings.
No feelings whatsoever.
So anyway, when we were talking about the fire, you might recall about a month ago,
yes,
we didn't have an episode because there was a fire
and we were
nearby, and we were encouraged to
under
vacate.
a mandatory evacuation. Police at our door.
Yes.
5 minutes after we got home from school on a Friday,
telling us to.
When all we want to do is have a beer, and we got to go.
Well, I was going to shoot up heroin. I was really excited for the weekend, but
and then there's a sheriff at the door.
Start heating up the needle, and then there's the cops.
Okay. Jeez.
Anyway, so
now you got some poor heroin addict out there feeling bad.
Who's trying to get clean, and now he's like, "Oh man,
I really need a." Okay. Anyhow.
Anyway, so with those fires, we started talking about great fires in history, and there's been,
well, we had planned the episode, and then we got Boz, and so that was going to be the week.
Sure.
And then Boz came, and that was grand.
We're a month out, but we smell.
Today,
we smell smoke.
It's hazy. I went to the nursery this morning,
and you can smell smoke outside. So hey, why not do a fire episode?
Okay, so we're going to use the research that we had already stored up, and I haven't read.
You haven't read?
Well,
that's not research. You got to read it.
Well, I read it.
Do you understand how research works?
Weeks ago,
teacher?
And then Boz came, and I figured we didn't need to prepare for that.
Do you understand how this works?
Yes, it's called procrastination, and then kids go, "Is that good? Is that all right?
Is that all right?
Is that all right, Miss Long?"
So we had to pick a couple fires that actually were.
Well, there have been numerous throughout history.
I encourage you to get on Wikipedia and just type in "great fires in history" and check out how many pages it actually is. Every major city in the world has had a major fire.
Well, of course they have, because the elements don't care.
Mother Nature doesn't care.
That's right.
And so first today, I am going to talk about the Great Fire of London.
Okay. You're not going to go all the way back to Rome.
Nah.
Nero and all that.
It's boring.
Torturing Christians and all that.
Nero did torture Christians, and he was blamed for starting the fire.
And fiddling while it burned.
Yeah, and that's all nonsense.
Is the myth.
And the Christians didn't burn the city. I mean, the city was ripe.
City burned for 6 days.
The city was ripe for burning.
Do you know why? I think the
wood.
Well, the culprit of all of this, too, seems to be the wind.
Wind and
numerous stories about how the wind joined in with the fire.
It turns out that if you're trying to avoid fire, building materials matter, and wood might not be your best choice.
Well, so we know that the marble buildings in Rome fared well, but the individuals not so much. Okay, so you're moving on to London? You're going to the
1666.
Well, see, there's the first problem.
3 6s?
Yeah. We know how they hate that around here.
And what's weird is when you start researching it, the first thing you find out is the death toll is so far out of whack for the number of things that burned and the number of people who came up missing afterwards.
Oh, that they
really don't know.
Well, no, it says about 13,000 homes.
Yes. And it was huge, and it was in the oldest part of the city too. And in 1666, a fire started in a small bakery owned, in fact, by someone who baked for the King of England.
Oh, well, that's why they didn't have their homes attached, or their kitchens attached to the castle directly.
You had thatch roofs. It was Thomas.
Cooking is dangerous.
Thomas Fariner was the baker.
Okay. And
sometime in the night, after midnight, the fire began. And the bakery was on, get this, Pudding Lane.
Pudding Lane.
Well,
Yes.
Now, at that time, the way you stopped a fire in a crowded, thatch-roofed wooden neighborhood
structures
was you brought down other structures in the path of that fire.
Oh, and tried to smother it with something, a bigger building?
Well, not even smother it, just give it nothing to burn.
Oh.
You're going to create fire breaks by pulling down buildings and getting rid of the debris.
But
so it can't leap from roof to roof.
Other buildings...
Well,
so you're creating a fire break, essentially.
Yes,
they didn't
it's
have
the same problem we have with the pine trees in Louisiana. It's not the fire on the ground that's the problem.
Yeah,
it's the fire 30 and 40 feet up in the air that's the problem. And it's the same thing with this neighborhood, half of London at that time still had thatched roofs, or they had dried out wooden shingle roofs, shaker roofs as they called them.
Yeah.
And so the fire would jump from roof to roof. So the way you do it is you take down an entire block. Whichever way the wind's going, get in front of the fire, take down some buildings.
Yeah.
They literally pulled them down. People's homes, didn't matter.
Get out.
Get out.
Well, so this is my question. It burned down over 4 days. It burned down about 13,000 houses and left 70,000 residents without a home.
That's correct.
So 13,000 houses, 70,000
residents.
people.
Yeah. And so apparently when this fire started, the Lord Mayor of London, who in a way sort of rules London because of how their governmental structure works, his name was Sir Thomas Bloodworth.
Oh, all right. Well, we have Bloodworths in our area.
And by the time he finally made a decision to say, yes, go ahead, start pulling down buildings, the fire had created the firestorm, which is pulling in so much oxygen and wind, it creates its own force.
Yeah, like a cyclone or a tornado of its own.
Right. And it's so weird because even as the fire was burning in the streets of London, people began fighting.
Like fisticuffs?
Yes, because rumors rose that foreigners were setting the fires.
Oh, well, see here in mine, it says that at first the authorities attempted to blame the Catholics for the arson.
Well, they did. In fact, they blamed the French first, Catholics.
Yes.
And then they started blaming the Dutch. And both of them were enemies in the war that England was fighting at that time.
It was an easy blame.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. So,
even though the French and the Dutch that lived in London were probably there for generations.
Here, and the logical side from the Royal Council said the fire was caused by the hand of God and a strong wind. Oh, and it was very dry. They had a very dry season. They had a drought.
Yes.
No.
And the fire continued spreading, pushed into Monday. And then the French and the Dutch people living in London were attacked by the English people in the streets.
So they just gave them an excuse to fight.
Right.
What else are we going to do? Our shit's gone.
By Tuesday morning, the fire had spread over nearly the entire Old City, which is the part of London that was inside the Roman wall.
When they could have been fighting the fire, they chose instead to fight each other.
Well, I would imagine the Catholics, probably the Dutch and the French, were probably like, "Look, we don't want to fight. We're trying to
put this out.
Can we put this out, and then we can get back to fighting? Whatever we could."
Oh, people.
Anyway, so the fire consumed St. Paul's Cathedral, the original.
Yes.
It leapt the River Fleet to threaten Charles Court at Whitehall. Coordinated firefighting efforts are now coming together. It's Tuesday.
Oh, okay.
And they're getting underway. The battle to put out the fire.
To come in.
They said that the fire really would not have been put out except for the help of, get this, Mother Nature. And one other key component. The battle to put out the fire, besides having a strong east wind completely just vanish, which was what was pushing the fire, they went and got gunpowder out of the Tower of London Armory, and they blew up buildings in the fire's path.
Oh, so same concept as pulling them down, just you get it done quicker.
Charles II, the king, had told everyone in that area.
Wait, is he the one that lost his head?
No, that was his dad.
Oh, okay.
This is Charles II.
All right.
Not Reformation, Restoration.
Restoration. Yeah, there's going to be some restoration needed.
He encouraged people to flee, just get out, run as fast as you can.
Mandatory evacuation.
And then they put out for people to come and design a brand new area.
And that's really from the research I did and thinking about Maui and what was happening there just before our fires really got underway is what comes afterwards.
Yeah. And London could have embraced the street designs laid out by many different people who submitted them. Mm-hmm. They decided to simply build it back on the exact same street lines that already existed.
Because it's what people knew.
And they are still there, by the way, the same street lines. One of the interesting things, though, was the fire. Why was it so difficult to fight a fire in London? And you have to imagine what the buildings were like.
Well, they're so close.
Well, they're next to each other, and upper floors are larger than lower floors.
Yeah, little
they hang out over the street.
They all look like mushrooms.
So you can't get water. You can't arc water onto top of
yeah.
a roof because the buildings are almost touching over the street.
And then the spark leaps to the next thatch roof.
Yes.
And so, okay, lesson learned, little pigs, blow your house down. Okay. And then we move on. Did they go to brick? Did they go to stone afterwards for a more...
Well, they did change building methods. And, of course, thatch roofs were banned.
Yeah.
We're going to get rid of that. But it is really interesting. And of course, the author who witnessed the whole thing, a guy by the name of Samuel Pepys, he climbed up into the upper tower of London to view the actual fire from as high a point as he could get.
Oh, so he was doing the drone job today.
Yeah. And he ended up making an entire record of the fire. By the time he saw it, it had burned down 300 houses.
Yeah.
So still,
but he was there till the end. So he wrote his diary.
But London Bridge at that time, people lived on it. It wasn't just a bridge. There were apartments attached to the sides of the bridge that hung out over the river, which basically gave you a toilet, which is nice.
Yeah, that's okay.
Very, very modern.
You got to make sure there's no barge coming by.
Do you?
That was the biggest bird I ever saw take a crap on me.
Anyway, the London Bridge is falling down.
Just it burned.
Yes, it was burning. It burned, and he got in a boat and went out into the Thames.
Peeps.
Yes, Peeps. He went out into the Thames, and did inspections and then brought that information to the king.
Yeah, well, he was a chronicler. I mean, that he did do that. We still have his history today.
Where people come about me and did give them an account, dismayed them all, and the word was carried unto the king. So I was called for and did tell the king and Duke of York what I had seen, and that unless his majesty commanded houses to be pulled down, nothing would stop the fire. They seemed much troubled, and the king commanded me to go to my lord mayor, the guy who did a crappy job, from him, and command him to spare no house, but to pull down every house before the fire in every way. Charles' brother, James, Duke of York, offered the use of royal lifeguards to help fight the fire. And Pepys found Bloodworth out with people fighting a fire, right? And he said, quote, "He was like a fainting woman, crying out plaintively in response to the king's message that he was pulling down houses. But the fire overtakes us faster than we can do it. Holding on to his dignity and civic authority, he refused James' offer of help and said he was tired and went home to bed."
Oh, wow.
King Charles heard of this. He gets in a boat. He sails down to where the houses are burning, and he discovers that no houses are being pulled down.
Nothing's being done, yeah.
In spite of Bloodworth's assurance to Pepys and daringly overrode the authority of Bloodworth to order wholesale demolitions west of the fire zone. So the king had to basically just say, look, I don't care what he says.
Wow.
Because the mayor of London had special powers, and he could refuse certain things from the king at this point in history.
But this is life and death. Yeah. Well, so it's the same kind of bureaucracy BS that was happening here with our fires when the state came in. Like the things that were being taken care of by the local people, and then the
state comes and says, you have to do it this way, and you have to use this equipment.
And then people begin. So it doesn't matter the time.
It doesn't.
It doesn't matter the century. It doesn't matter the culture. People are idiots.
When the fire spread to the financial heart of London,
now
the houses of the bankers began to burn, prompting a rush to rescue all of the gold coins before they melted.
Oh, nice.
Several observers emphasized the despair and helplessness which seemed to seize Londoners when they realized that the fire was still burning out of control on the second day. So this was the second day.
Oh my God! All right, let's get to. Are you done with the London fire? Have you gotten to a resolve here?
Well, I guess I can resolve it. On Wednesday, the wind dropped, and the fire breaks created by the blowing up of houses began to take effect. Pepys climbed the steeple of Barking Church.
The steeple of Barking. You mean Bella's home, her throne?
Church, from which he viewed the destroyed city, said it was the saddest sight of desolation that I ever saw.
Wow.
There were many separate fires still burning, but the great fire had ended. It took some time until the last traces were put out. In Moorfields, the public park north of the city, there was an encampment of homeless refugees. And, of course, then the problems of sewage and just all these people being
all the logistics that go with living.
And the fires, they don't know how many people died in the fires. They're actually
no, they didn't keep
unsure
accurate records then. We don't even, we do a better job, but I still question that even now in modern times.
The reconstruction, when they rebuilt it, they kept most of the same streets, kept it the same shape. They did change. They made things better as far as hygiene and fire safety, wider streets, accessible wharves along the Thames so that houses couldn't obstruct access to the water.
You could get water.
Buildings had to be constructed of brick and stone, not wood. The Rebuilding of London Act of 1666 banned wood from the exterior of buildings. And set out a rebuilding period of 3 years in which land could be sold. So if you didn't reclaim your burned property, the city took it.
Then the city took it.
And a duty was imposed on coal to support the civic rebuilding costs. So they taxed coal.
And things were better afterwards.
Yes.
Of course they were.
I love this one part, though, and this is kind of funny. There was an English economist named Nicholas Barbon, and he had enough money to reshape part of London with his own rebuilding scheme.
Okay.
Unbeknownst to people who couldn't look down, right?
Yeah, they couldn't see it.
He developed the Strand, St. Giles, Bloomsbury, and Holborn. And of course, these were built despite the restrictions that said it was illegal to build between the City of London and Westminster. He went ahead and just did it. But they're some of the most popular streets for tourists today.
I was going to say, he built a market area.
Yes. And what did the fire do to London? It changed their demographics completely.
Oh, I'm sure.
Areas to the west of London all received higher numbers of residents, a huge increase in the population. Approximately 9,000 new houses were built in the area, which 13,000 had been destroyed. Tenants who did remain in London saw a significant decrease in their costs because nobody was left. So it's like after the plague. Everybody got better jobs, pay went up. The economic center of London actually shifted because of this, because of so many people being displaced. Interestingly enough, though, during World War II, one of the areas that was bombed really heavily was this area where everybody had moved after the fire of 16. So 250 years later, that area, which wouldn't have had the same kind of population it had except for the fire, is one of the places where it was just
because it would have been the poor.
And
we know how they feel about.
And of course, we got a brand new St. Peter's Cathedral designed by Christopher Wren, and of course it's gorgeous and all that good stuff. And somehow survived the Germans in World War II. Well, some things did. It was all happenstance. So anyway, there you go.
All right.
A quick synopsis of the
fire.
1666
Well, and that really, it is a famous fire. There's also
a rumor that it ended the Black Plague in London, which was going on the year before, or actually about 2 years before.
So the idea that maybe it burned a bunch of animals and rats and fleas, and I could see it being.
I could too.
But how do you study that?
You can't.
You can't. Okay. So they often title them great fires when there are a lot of them and they're not always that great. American.
Yeah, they're not that great.
No, the New
Those
York
fires aren't great at all.
100 years later in 1776 in New York, there was a Great Fire of New York.
It was awesome.
Well, I don't know about that. I don't know. It really did a whole lot. But we were, of course, fighting the British at that time.
Were we?
Yes, in New York in particular. And by the summer of 1776, the British were already occupying a lot of New York. And then one of the Revolutionary officers came up with the bright idea, well, let's just burn the city.
Yeah, there you go.
And then we'll get rid of the British that way. We don't have to fight them. We can just burn them out. Now, the idea of burning your city in order to...
Yeah, the British captured New York like at the beginning of the war and held on to it till nearly the end of the war.
Well, so most of the command of the American side said, no, we're not going to do that.
No.
But then, September 20th, a week later, city suddenly caught fire in a cafe. Yeah. Cafe. And then, of course, the windy wind doing what it does.
The windy wind.
Threw the blaze from one building to another.
Wind blows.
500 houses burned down. Many of the revolutionary invaders died. They don't have a number.
Of course.
And the rest of the Revolutionary Army at that point left. Yeah.
There you go.
So the Great Fire of New York.
Not that
not
great.
That great. Not that
In
great.
fact, I think most of them are not that great.
No. Well, but then we talk about the aftermath.
The aftermath sometimes is awesome.
Isn't this the balance of life?
The Great Chicago Fire is actually a perfect example.
All right. Do you want to get there? You're further ahead in time. Oh, yeah. You're about almost another 100 years. We have jumped 300 years.
Boom.
Boom.
Time travel, baby.
You burned through it, sir. Okay.
That's right. The Great Chicago Fire. And
1871.
1871. Now, only killed 300 people. Isn't that crazy? And here's the best part. Only 3.3 square miles. That was practically nothing compared to the London.
Then why do they call it the Great Fire?
Because it destroyed 17,000 structures and left 100,000 residents homeless.
In a 3-mile area?
Yes.
Jesus Christ. Were these people like
100,000
That was my question about the other
packed
fire.
In there.
You have 13,000 structures, but 70,000 citizens are displaced.
Well, this is 17,000 structures and 100,000.
I need a calculator.
Residents.
I need to do the math. How many people were living in a structure?
Well, who knows? It depends on the structure, I'm sure.
Well,
but it was Chicago.
But you see what I'm saying.
And it's widely believed that it started in a small barn, so it must have gotten to an area with heavy.
First we had an oven, then we had an intentional cafe fire in the the Revolutionary time. Now
a disgruntled cook.
Yes, now we have a cow in O'Leary's barn. Is the story
in the southwest? That was a lot of
Speak the words clear.
In the southwest of the city center. First of all, what do you need to have for a good fire?
You need
drought.
You need
drought.
And you need wind.
And you need wind. And Chicago had it in droves that year. And Chicago was entirely wooden. The city was basically built of wood, and the fire managed to leap the Chicago River and then got into central Chicago, and then leapt the main stem of the river and consumed the north side. Now, this is a 3.3 square miles. So,
but it jumped the river too.
Yes,
so.
it's a weird. I like the picture where it shows how it went, and by gosh, if this was a video, you could see it. It's not. So
we're not doing all that.
Trust me on this. Anyway. Help flowed for the city from near and far. Boy, I mean, people came so fast. And, well, it didn't matter. Supposedly, the way it starts is around 8:30 on October 8th, a small barn that belonged to the O'Leary family that bordered an alley, not that it matters, but on DeKoven Street. The shed was the first building consumed. They never did figure out why.
Well, I know. They just blamed the cow.
The fire, because of the drought and the very strong winds, and the fire very quickly destroyed the water pumping station nearby.
Yes, and that causes.
And so they didn't have anything to fight it with. Pumper cars back then were drawn by horse, and they were small. They just couldn't carry that much water. Of course, the tale says it was her cow who knocked over a lantern. Others state that a group of men gambling inside the barn knocked over a lantern. Still others suggest that the blaze was related to embers that came from a fire we'll talk about in just a few minutes.
Oh, well, it was just a few 100 miles away.
Yeah.
Oh.
Interesting.
And then everybody fled there and went
so
on to...
the fire you've never heard of because the Chicago fire gets all the press.
Well, and it's called the Great Chicago Fire. This fire is not.
No,
it doesn't get a great.
Anyway, so at that time, Chicago's fire department consisted of 185 firefighters with 17 horse-drawn pumpers. The initial response was timely, but due to an error by the watchman, the firefighters were sent to the wrong place.
No.
An alarm was sent from an area near the fire, also failed to register at the courthouse where the fire watchmen were. While the firefighters were tired from having fought numerous small fires that week because of drought, and one large fire the week before, this thing just went crazy. Now, here's the best part. If you get on Wikipedia, you can actually look at the cottage that was next to the barn. It didn't burn. The fires were so strong, and the house next to the shed didn't burn.
So, and the wind was blowing.
The wind pushed it away from the house. Wow. So the house owned by the O'Learys did not burn in the Chicago fire. Isn't that crazy?
That is crazy. Well,
I thought that was awesome.
There was a local fire that was set here because several of our fires in our
most of our fires were arson.
Yeah,
most of them. In fact,
well, there was arson, and then there was stupidity.
Well, but they go hand in hand.
I know they do, but they didn't intend to start a fire.
No, they intended to start a tiny fire.
They wanted to start a
during
small fire.
Don't burn stuff order.
Insanity.
Yeah.
All right. So
anyway, the firefighters finally get to the street where the fire had started. It had already moved 500 yards down the road.
Sure.
And
left it nothing in.
And then it got to the river where lumber yards, warehouses full of armaments, and coal yards all were parked.
Oh.
As the fire grew, the southwest wind intensified and became superheated. Structures would catch fire just from the heat.
The heat.
That's how hot it was.
The air was so hot that it...
Yes. Around midnight, flaming debris blew across the river and landed on roofs and, this is fun, the South Side Gas Works, supplying gas to all of the lanterns throughout Chicago. Flammable gas.
Well, yeah, it says here that 2,000 lampposts were burned.
I'll bet.
Wow. 120 miles of sidewalks, 17,000 buildings.
At this point, it's moving to the city center. It's heading right for the center of the city, right along the water. And the mayor, Roswell Mason, sent messages to nearby towns asking for help. The courthouse caught fire. He called for the building to be evacuated, and he even allowed the prisoners who were jailed in the basement to be released. Wasn't that nice?
Wow. That's nice so kind of them
I just think that's so progressive.
Yeah, it is very progressive. Save the criminals.
And so then we had the fire whirl, which from
that's the cyclone or tornado.
From witnesses who saw this happen, they saw the fire tornado.
Wow. Reported it in there.
The debris flew so high that, of course, it crossed the main branch of the Chicago River. It landed on railroad cars carrying kerosene.
Oh, Jesus. Could anything else go against them?
It's almost a comedy.
I know, of terrifying proportions.
And then it landed on a building that clearly said, really flammable. And
Acme really flammable company? Right. Is that what you're going for?
That's right. And so the firefighters, however, keep fighting the battle. It jumps another river. A burning piece of timber lodged on the roof of the city's waterworks, the Bain Waterworks building.
Oh, no.
Oh, you bet. And within minutes, it was destroyed, and the city's water mains went dry.
Nobody had water.
So at that point, it was just unchecked.
It's the fire's free for all. Do it.
On October 9th, it finally started to rain. And the fire had already actually started to burn itself out because it had moved to a very sparsely populated area.
Oh, like here we were hoping it was going to the gravel pit?
Yeah. Well, that's what happened.
It's not going to burn.
It just burned itself out because there was nothing left to burn.
Nothing left to burn. Beware of being the roller.
I might tell that poem one day. 3 weeks after the fire, they could finally get in to examine the fire, the damage. It was too hot. They just couldn't do it.
Couldn't even get near it.
4 miles, averaging 3/4 of a mile wide, almost like a tornado went through, but it was a fire tornado. 2,000 acres in the city, 73 miles of roads, 2,000 lampposts, and about a third of the city's valuation actually disappeared.
Well, now that when there was a point when you were telling your story that I suddenly realized last night when I was reading my book that Garfield had gone to Chicago.
Future show.
Well, I know, but it connects to this because he was commenting on he had been in Chicago before the fires and he came back afterwards. And just it had been like a year or a year and a half after the fires and how magnificent it was.
The great white city.
Yes, it was beautiful. And he had commented on that and how fast they had rebuilt.
Yeah.
So again, the aftermath. Changes everything for a town.
Well, the city was so devastated that there was no police force basically, and there was, of course, looting and the usual things. Mm-hmm. Because Brotherhood of Man and all that.
Oh yeah.
And they asked that General Sheridan from the Civil War, come to the aid of the city, and he was placed in charge of the city by the mayor Roswell Mason. The preservation of the good order and peace of the city of Chicago is hereby entrusted to Lieutenant General P.H. Sheridan, U.S. Army. The city was put under martial law.
Okay.
And Sheridan's command structure with a mix of regular troops, police, and militia units. And then they began deputizing civilians, calling them the 1st Regiment of Chicago Volunteers.
To keep the peace.
To keep the peace. And 2 weeks after he was brought in, he said, "We've done it. Things are good. I'm out of here."
Wow. So you know what? I like that the mayor recognized that was a serious issue, that you can't just leave people to their own devices because some people you just can't reach.
Yeah. And so total 1 in 3 residents was displaced.
Yeah.
1/3 of the city.
Natural disasters do that. And they they just changed the demographics of many areas. So while your fire was going on, or just prior to that, a few hundred miles from Chicago.
we got to talk about real quick. Chicago, of course, in the aftermath.
Yeah, the aftermath.
New rules and new laws made it so they couldn't use wood anymore. Mm-hmm. And the very first skyscraper was built in Chicago.
I read that in the book last night.
And that changed building in America completely.
Mm-hmm.
Because you could now go up and you didn't have to worry about wood burning.
Yeah. So now you just have to worry about earthquake or the whole system collapsing or eventually a plane crashing into it and some other tragedy.
Yes. And 22 years later, when they hosted the Columbian Exposition,
mm-hmm.
21 million visitors came through Chicago, and it was considered to be a huge success, and the city looked amazing.
Well, and they couldn't have done that prior to the fire.
That's absolutely true. And finally, in 1956, the structure that had sat at the Leary property was torn down for construction of the Chicago Fire Academy, the training facility for Chicago firefighters known as the Quinn Fire Academy.
So they put it at the location,
the place where it started.
All right. I wonder if in London, where the oven at the baker's, where that would.
I don't know.
Yeah, what that is now.
Pudding Lane.
That would be an interesting.
I'm going to go look later. I'm going to look at Google.
Yeah, that would be an interesting.
Pudding Lane is still there.
Vacation plan, right? Great fire locations.
Well, I
go and actually see them all.
An author who wrote a book called Assassination Vacation.
Yeah,
she went to all the places
where
cops were killed. Where presidents were killed.
Yes, we'll talk about that next time.
All right. So Chicago fire was happening. So there was no fires anywhere else, though, right?
Well, of course there was. That was the problem. And as you indicated, that possibly this could have sent an ember, I don't know, a few hundred miles away from Chicago in Peshtigo, Wisconsin, the fire of 1871. So same days. I mean, it's happening at the same time.
Yep.
But of course, it was actually in the human life sense, it was a far worse fire.
Yes.
The event was
far fewer people died in Chicago.
Than the Peshtigo. 2,500 people died in Wisconsin because of that.
I think that was the greatest number of people killed in a wildfire
it was.
in history. Right?
At that time, the wildfire burned 17 cities to the ground.
Wow.
The flames swallowed up about 2,000 square miles, city miles. It was impossible really to count all the victims because, as you said in your earlier one, it's hard to get true numbers.
Right.
But
we can't even get numbers out of Maui, right? I mean,
they were. At last I heard they were still missing people, but of course I haven't heard anything in quite some time.
Well, it's not important anymore.
That story just dropped off completely.
Of course it did. Something else
because now those investors are going to come in quietly.
It's all about the election now, Miss Long. Don't you understand?
I know. Okay, so approximately 2,500 victims, probably more.
And this was in a rural tree-filled area.
Yes, of course.
So imagine Louisiana.
Well, yeah.
I mean, that's kind of what would happen.
Right now, when you say 2,000 miles and 17 cities, here we're thinking, man, we had like 50,000 acres burned. You know, I don't know how many square miles that was, though.
Yeah, I'm not sure.
So I guess it's a different
2,000 square miles is a huge.
Yeah. Well,
no, it couldn't have been 2,000 square miles.
That's what it says. Swallowed up 2,000 square miles. 17 cities, 17 little towns.
But 2,000 square miles indicates that you have 2,000 in each direction, but that's impossible on the United States map. I mean, I'm just saying.
Okay, maybe because it's got to be more than
200 square miles.
And they just put a comma?
Or something's wrong there.
All right, maybe so. You could Google it.
You know what? I will find out.
You will go check our stats, and Bella didn't bark, so maybe, I don't know.
Anyway, do they know what caused it?
Well, first, every inhabitant of the town of Peshtigo died
Every single person.
Every single person in that town died. Fire tornadoes rushed through the cities, igniting just everything. Obviously, there was a lot of wood. We know there was a drought because there was a drought in Chicago at that time as well. And there was no one there to help because they were all in Chicago. They had sent all of their firefighters.
All in Chicago.
Yes. So it was Peshtigo, Port Huron, the Great Chicago Fire, all known as the Great Michigan Fire. So they put all three. There was another fire in Port Huron at that time, and they put all of those as the Michigan Fire. So that's the heading for them. The worst forest fire at that time.
Yeah, that's outrageous. And if you go...
Are you looking? Did you find it?
I haven't found the total. I'm not finding the total acreage.
So it's sketchy.
But the museum in Peshtigo looks like fun.
I know. I did go look at their city today because I wanted to see the aftermath because there's nothing here about the aftermath.
Here we go. The Great Midwest Fires of 1871, of which there were many.
Yeah.
We have the Chicago Fire.
It was a drought year.
And we have the Peshtigo Fire. Peshtigo. 1.5 million acres.
Oh wow!
So we're talking over there. What do they say? Like 35,000?
And then another 19,000 behind our house.
So 1.5 million acres.
Good Lord!
Only one building in Peshtigo survived the fire.
Okay.
This is interesting, though. This is written by a pastor, the Reverend Peter Pernin, he would detail the number of personal stories who were there, people who got out before the fire got to Peshtigo. He says, Terrence Kelly, his wife, and 4 children lived in the upper Sugar Bush. This was an area. When the fire came with a terrible wind, speed, and smoke, the family became separated. Voices could not be heard because of the roar of the fire. Mr. Kelly had a child in his arms, as did Mrs. Kelly. The other 2 children clung to each other. In search of safety, each group lost track of the others. The next day, Mr. Kelly and a child were found dead nearly a mile from his farm. The mother and another child were safe. The other children, a boy and a girl, 5 in total, were found sleeping in each other's arms near the farm. The house, barn, and all the outbuildings had burned to the ground, but the children were fine.
Wow. So it was only the dad.
It must have been. That tells you 2 things: how fast the fire was moving, and how they probably were in like a little depression or something. The fire just passed right over the top of them. I read about that with the great Tokyo fire that we caused in World War II. And people
like
survived
craters.
in really weird ways. People would like fall down and the fire moved so fast past them.
It just went right over.
It burned their clothes off their body,
but it
didn't
just
give
skirted.
them severe burns even in some cases. It just left them naked and wondering what the hell as they look around at all this blackened stuff around them.
That's terrifying.
Isn't that crazy?
It really is. I mean, you can get out of the way of a hurricane. Just nothing.
And I do think it's interesting. The fire in Peshtigo resulted from a number of factors, including the prolonged drought, logging, and the non-clearing of land in a timely manner by local industry.
Which is the part of the cause we were talking about here. We have that issue.
We have all that stuff on the ground.
And it's funny when the Long Bell Lumber Company was here, because that's why they're no longer here. At the time they
cut everything down.
They cut everything down. There were no trees left, but then the lumber mill burned down and there were no trees after that to cut, so they didn't rebuild.
Yeah. And and here we go. We talk about this kind of stuff all the time. The fires in 1871 served as a wake-up call to many about the land use practices of the time.
Management.
Timber from cleared land was often discarded without regard to its potential for fuel wildfires or just left to lay on the ground. The subsequent 144 years has seen an evolution in how to mitigate wildfire potential by clearing the land and maintenance around the forests to prevent wildfires.
Wow. I know California doesn't adhere to that practice, and they have horrific fires every year.
Now, no fire has ever come close to the size
of that fire in Peshtigo.
No.
And then they just lump it in with the
you don't even hear
Chicago.
about it. I'd never heard about it, ever.
Okay, so
anyway.
that's pretty terrifying. About a year later, there was a Great Boston Fire, the largest urban fire,
there's been a bunch.
Considered one of the most costliest in losses in U.S. history. 65 acres in Boston, downtown, 776 buildings.
Well, we We also have, of course, our own Louisiana fire.
Our own Louisiana fire?
Actually, two of them.
Yeah.
Fairly close together, too, weirdly enough.
New Orleans.
New Orleans.
Oh, yeah. Okay.
Yeah. Well, by the way, a great fire.
Oh, it
both
was
of them were great fires.
Oh, okay. Well, I'm glad we get that moniker. It needs to be great if it's going to be New Orleans.
Well, actually, it was known at the time as the Gran Incendio de Nueva New Orleans.
Oh, all right. That's nice.
Or the French Grand Incendie de la Nouvelle Orleans.
Orléans. All right. Do that because that brings us back to home.
Yes.
All right.
Full
and what year?
circle. 1788.
Oh, yeah. So we're actually going back in time a little bit.
This one happened. The first one happened in 1788, and it was
in the quarter area.
Yep, it's going to in the heart of New Orleans. Yes, destroyed 856 of the 1,100 structures in New Orleans, Louisiana at the time.
And it's better.
So
now.
There were only 1,100. It destroyed 856 of them, spanning the south central Vaucarre from Burgundy to Charter Street, almost to the Mississippi River.
Burgundy.
What did I say? Burgundy? No, don't they say?
You said Burgundy.
Oh, did I? It's Burgundy. Sorry.
Well, I know.
Yeah. Okay. Well, whatever.
Oh, did you make a mistake? Did you just admit to making a mistake?
All right.
Hold the presses. Stop everything.
You can put it in the book. All right.
I definitely will put it in the book.
One day you're going to have to turn the page on that.
Well, see, I don't care about making mistakes. I'll do that.
Well, I just make them so rarely that it's a special treat when you get one.
Shut up.
Anyway, so the fire, as any good fire should, started on Good Friday. About 1:30.
Well, they need okay.
At the home of Army Treasurer Don Vicente Jose Nunez.
Wow, he's multicultural.
Yep, less than a block from Jackson Square, the Plaza de Armas. Because the fire started on Good Friday, priests refused to allow church bells to be rung to alert people to the fire.
Say what? It's God's plan. Let it burn.
Priests refused to allow church bells to be rung as a call as a fire alarm.
So it's a duplicate of Maui then. We're not going to ring the alarms.
They were begged for hours. Within 5 hours, it had consumed almost the entire city as it was fed by a strong wind from the southeast.
Oh.
The fire destroyed virtually all major buildings in the city, now known as the French Quarter, including the church, municipal buildings, army barracks, army, and jail. Colonel Governor Esteban Rodriguez Miro set up tents for the homeless. You might notice this isn't very French.
Very. Yeah.
The fire stretched between Dauphin Street and the Mississippi River, between Conti and St. Philippe, or Philip, if you wish. It spared the riverfront buildings, including the Customs House, the Tobacco Warehouses, the Governor's Building, the Royal Hospital, and the Ursuline Convent, where they probably weren't allowed to ring bells either.
No, don't warn people. God wants this to happen. It's Good Friday.
So
we're going to have a great fire on Good Friday.
Colonial officials were to replace the wooden buildings with masonry structures, which had courtyards, thick brick walls, arcades, and wrought iron balconies.
So that what we have now.
Yep. Among the new buildings were to be the central New Orleans, now Jackson Square fixtures of St. Louis Cathedral, the Cabildo, and the Presbyter. The funds for the supervision for the cathedral and Cabildo were provided by Don Andre Almonaster Rojas. The Cabildo burned in 1794, however, and had to be reconstructed. So, yes, there was another fire. So the buildings, when you go to Jackson Square and you look left and right, those buildings aren't identical, but they are similar. And they were all designed by the same guy.
Oh, so that's how we have some uniformity.
Right. And the Presbyter was built later, and the guy who designed it, Almonaster, died before it could be completed. So there were some changes that were made that made it because it was supposed to be a duplicate. Those buildings were supposed to be identical.
Oh, I see.
Just so you know, Governor Miro said this: if the imagination could describe what our senses enable us to feel from sight and touch, reason itself would recoil in horror. And it is no easy matter to say whether the sight of an entire city in flames was more horrible to behold than the suffering and pitiable condition in which everyone was involved. Mothers in search of sanctuary or refuge for their children, and abandoning everything to the greed of the most relentless enemy, would retire to out of the way places rather than be witness to their utter ruin. People were just they couldn't even look at it. They were so.
Oh, the fire? Or,
yes, the fire.
I thought you were going to say their enemy was man.
No, the fire was their enemy.
Yeah, okay.
And
but yeah, there's nothing left behind. But, fire isn't totally a bad thing.
The tears, the heartbreaking sobs, and pallid faces of the wretched people mirrored the dire fatality that now overcame the city, totally in ruins, transformed within the space of 5 hours into an arid desert. Such was the sad ending of the work of death, the result of 70 years of industry. But
it needed to be cleaned up and redone.
After 6 years of rebuilding, in 1794, another 212 buildings were destroyed by the Great New Orleans Fire of 1794.
The less great.
Still a colony of Spain and rebuilding in the Spanish style, and it destroyed the rest of the French part of the city.
Oh,
so that is why everything
is Spanish.
Yes. When you're in New Orleans, the French Quarter, there is no French anything there.
Except
for the names.
Yeah.
But it's all Spanish architecture.
So the names transferred over. They didn't change those.
They really didn't change them that much.
Left.
There's a few.
Yeah.
There's a few.
Huh.
The second fire did not destroy the cathedral. St. Louis Cathedral.
Yeah.
Came very close. Really close. And it was dedicated like 2 days later, even after that fire.
Oh, wow. So
I guess they felt like they needed to hurry and dedicate.
Yeah, do it now. Do it now.
Quick, hurry.
Okay, so
anyway, there you
always
go.
the aftermath, though, because fire is cleansing. I mean, it does serve a purpose.
Sadly.
In nature. Yeah, as far as what it does to animal life and human life, but it also requires that rebirth, right? In the forest, you clean the underbrush, you open it up to sunlight, you nourish the soil, and in city, biological diversity.
And even besides the destruction of buildings and homes, think about a great fire, go way back, the Great Fire at Alexandria in Egypt destroyed knowledge that had been stored for centuries that was gone. We lost that knowledge.
Who knows what we
Who
knows what we don't know now?
Exactly.
Because of that.
And so there you go, fire. The great
leveler, sure. Nature is the great leveler.
I suppose so. But fire is nature.
Exactly. That's the whole point.
It's nature at its angriest.
It's doing part of it. It has a purpose. It serves a function, because especially things that man builds, need to be maintained.
And it's really weird too, because you drive through a place.
That's what's going on. It's maintenance of the earth.
Well, it's after the hurricane. It had to happen, right?
Well, yeah, it's been 3 years.
But you could drive through over there through Bastrop, Texas, where they had the fires many years ago. You drive that area now, it's green, man. It's
lush.
Beautiful.
Exactly.
It's lush.
It nourished the soils. Yep. It gave new things opportunities to grow. So, fire, like all things.
Now, I would like it to stay away from my house, please.
Yes,
but else's houses.
As with everything, we what did we do? All right, if this happens, this is what we're going to do. Yes. We start planning for the worst.
Plan for the worst.
Hoping for the best.
Hope for the best.
But that's life. You know.
Yep.
Nature takes care of its own maintenance, and if we don't maintain, then nature will come in and do it for us.
That's absolutely true.
So isn't that true with the government? It's been built for so long and has not been properly maintained. It hasn't been
pruned.
And now we got 100-year-old centurions in there that need to go.
They need to go.
They need to go.
Hey, old people, quit it. Quit it. Stop worrying about it.
We need a line. Okay, that's my preach on that. Maintenance. Life is about that. Find your balance.
If you're over 70 and you're in Congress or the Senate,
let the power
you need to be pruned.
Let the power
Trees
go.
need to be pruned. And the tree of government, Thomas Jefferson once said it needed to be watered by the blood of tyrants occasionally. Well, it certainly needs to be pruned.
At least, at the very least.
Now, am I calling for anyone to do anything other than just go away? No.
No.
Just go away.
Well, no, we're calling
Make room.
You're calling for our listeners to vote.
Oh, yeah.
Vote their brain, not their heart.
And if somebody's a zillion years old,
that means.
If somebody talks like this, I'm running for office.
I was involved in the Great Fire of 1666.
I remember the Great Chicago Fire of 1871.
Stop it. It's been
and I was there.
It's been a silly
No
day.
Joke.
I'm done.
Let me tell you about a story my dad told me.
I'm done with Biden. Stop it. Are you done now?
I don't know.
I need you to do a McCain and freeze. Oh, no, not McCain.
Nope.
He's dead.
Oh. F you, Debbie.
He had the great.
Why don't you do a McCain? Oh, you wound me. You wound me to the heart. You wound me, ma'am.
All right.
Do a McCain.
It's been a silly day.
Well, you do an Emily Dickinson.
You quit it.
I'm sorry.
Okay. There's no sense in that. The community doesn't understand any of your foolishness. Any of it.
Where is the decorum? That's Latin.
We left it at the Durham.
Oh. Okay.
Yeah. Okay. Are you done now? Bring it back.
Oh.
Circle back. We have an audience.
Yeah.
A couple hundred. We got like a 500.
Okay. Yeah. Fire. There you go. Fire bad. Sometimes.
Unless it's good.
It makes good marshmallows.
It's bad at the time when you're living through it, and you lose everything.
Sure.
At least with a hurricane, you can come home and
pick up the rubble,
pick up some stuff. And we didn't even talk about those poor people in Maui and what's about to happen to their life.
We didn't.
They're going to get soda-soaped right out of their area.
Oh yeah. If you were just a person living there in an old house with no, or
it was your heritage and you had been
you're going to.
That's about to be an elite area for
tourists,
for rich people,
for tourists.
Well, I hope that we're coming to an end of putting up with the rich.
All right. And we're coming to the end of another Long in the Boot.
We are. No.
Ladies and gentlemen, we're coming to the end of another Long in the Boot podcast. That's a really good microphone.
We've come full circle. All right.
We have.
I think that's it. All right. You all need to stay safe out there. Do a little maintenance in life and find your joy and take it out there with you.
You make it sound like joy is portable.
It is. Take it everywhere.
All right.
I carry it in my heart.
There you go.
Even with along with my cynicism.
See y'all in 2 weeks. Wait.
Okay.
Okay, you're allowed to speak now.
Okay. Now I sound like Annie Lennox. Okay. And then she bursts into song. I can't sound like Annie Lennox.
Oh, no. God,
she
who
is
does
the queen.
Besides Annie Lennox?
Her and Natalie Merchant and Anita Baker, they're just velvet.
So good.
Push the button, Glenn.
Crap. Forgot to pot up the song.
You should have it on cue. Do it.
It was ready to go. I just didn't.
Do it, Long. Get it right.
Have the volume up. Stop pressuring me.
I will. We got to get this shit done.